morning to everyone. Uh, Thank you, John O, and Malik, two very dear friends and veritable inspiration in the space. Thank you so much for championing the Philippines to the rest of the world. Now, I'd like to also welcome and maybe give a few minutes to talk about what they're currently working on. Let's have Mr. Dick Chiang of DragonPay. Happy 10th birthday to DragonPay, Dick.
Thank you, Amor. Yeah, things have been quite busy since the pandemic. As I shared in the event the other day, we have seen quite a significant uptake in transactions, especially during the pandemic. So back in February, if you compare our volume in February versus today, the total volume has almost quadrupled. And we have seen quite a different shift in the payment mix. Whereas before the pandemic, before the quarantine started, we were seeing probably like 70% cash and like 30% digital. But today it's like the complete opposite. It's like almost 70% digital and 30% cash. It doesn't mean though that cash transactions have dwindled. In fact, it has more or less just sort of stabilized, whereas digital just really took off. So from a total mix perspective, digital is now taking up almost 70% of our volume, which is pretty exciting. And it would be very interesting to see in the coming days whether that trend will continue, even hopefully when we eventually get out of this pandemic, whether the behavior will stay and whether people will keep on continuing using it, or whether they go back to their old habits. So something interesting to see.
You know, Dick, at 10 years old, and I don't mean to give your age away, you are probably one of the pioneering fintechs in the country. Definitely one of the founding fathers of fintech. Could you share with our audience, with our global audience, how you've seen fintech evolve from year one to year 10 of DragonPay, from the DragonPay filter?
Okay, yeah, we started back in 2010 when I felt that was like the tipping point, which John O was talking about earlier. At least for the local e-commerce, 2010 was a definitive year. That was the time the deal sites came in, the Metro Deal, the Cash Cash Pinoy, and Sogo. And I think for the first time, it allowed Filipinos to buy things that normally you wouldn't go online in purchasing. Back then, the only thing that you could really pay for online were things like airline tickets or hotel bookings. So when the deal sites came in, suddenly you can buy everything from a neighborhood restaurant deal to a spa deal, and the basket size significantly dropped. Whereas airline tickets back then would be in the 5 or 6 figures, but suddenly you can buy a 100 peso deal in your neighborhood. So it greatly changed things. So we came into the market at a time when there was really not much of a concept of alternative payments. So we introduced the capability to buy things online, but physically pay it through your neighborhood convenience store, supermarkets, or over the counter through the banks. So back then it was kind of revolutionary in that sense. And even online banking back then was really, really in its nascent stage. I would say maybe 10% or less of our transactions back then were going through online banking. And everything was really going through cash. So over the past 10 years, we have really seen a gradual shift. In the case of online banking, personally, I feel that the switch is not as fast. Not as many people are going into online banking as I would have expected, as compared to digital wallets, for example. Coins and Gcash for us have really been big drivers in the growth. Incredible numbers that we have seen, especially during the lockdown period. So people are definitely getting used to going digital, and kudos to the bank and maybe BSP in helping nudge them along during the pandemic, wherein the InstaPay fees and the PesoNet fees were waived. And I think that was a really game changer as well. Back then, people were very hesitant in using these other interbank options because they were quite expensive. Admittedly, some banks would charge like 50 pesos or 100 pesos, and it didn't make sense to do micropayments with those kinds of fees. And of course, when October came in and the fees were brought back in, I'm not sure exactly how much of the behavior changed back. It would be interesting to see it from the bank's point of view whether the transactions dropped when they started bringing back in the fees. Uh, yeah, very interesting things to see. But definitely, there has been quite a big evolution from cash to startly going into digital today.
You should do your own fintech history in the same way that Malik has done what I thought was an intensely clever A to Z of fintech. Malik, we gotta socialize that around. That's excellent. Now I'm also very honored to have in our panel Mr. Hassan Ahmed. Hi, Hassan.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Amor. Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
so
me.
much. Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Having both DragonPay and also Coins here. Now, um, Dick mentioned something that I'd like to kind of probe you on, which is um, how it seems like the banking ecosystem has not pivoted as quickly as the wallets have, right? So you guys between Coins.ph has really paved the way for a lot of the education in the market. Could it be because of the fact that um, banks are not yet fully talking to each other? They're not yet fully interoperable, as opposed to, say, Gcash, Coins, and the other wallets. There seems to be an open love going around that is not yet present in the banking segment. What do you think,
Uh,
Hassan?
yeah, thank you for that question, Amor. And just let me start by saying that as maybe the one of the newer members of the fintech community in the Philippines, I am very honored to be serving in this role at Coins and to be part of the ecosystem as a whole. Having spent some time in other fintech environments in the U.S. and Indonesia, Singapore, even Pakistan, I actually see a lot of potential for payments and fintech in general for the Philippines. In order to kind of get things going, there's some catalysts that have to come together at a unique moment in time. And what many of us on the panel know is that there's been a lot of building that's been going on in the background over the last few decades at this point. And I really think that because of some of the accelerated behaviors because of COVID, we are truly at an inflection point in a sustained way that's going to take our collective breaths away in the next few years in terms of the adoption and the volumes and the new products and access that Filipinos will be able to get in the coming years. So I'm very, very bullish and very optimistic on the outlook for our country and our market. Now, to your specific question, look, banks are the backbone of the any financial system, and they have to also come along for the ride and in many ways reinvent themselves as these innovation cycles go through. In business school, one of the concepts I had studied was this notion of feeding the beast. So as a company gets bigger and bigger, it really gets anchored in its decision making on paying attention to its core business. And for banks, the way that they've sort of traditionally grown up is through kind of a physical retail distribution, and that sort of core kind of deposit account construct with like its traditional account opening processes. So and I think a lot of the the kind of heads of the banks that I spoke to, they get it. They are also in the midst of their own evolution. But I think just given the scale and the breadth that many of these larger banks have, it just takes a little bit of time. I'm sure that Malik can even attest to this, that it felt like for the longest time, Citibank was just doing nothing, and it was just taking, resting on its laurels. And then I think in the last 5 years or so, it's just coming up with like innovation after innovation after innovation. And it really, I think even in the US, when I was, in Venmo over there, they came up with features and kind of UX that even we were like, wow, that's that's really impressive. So I am expecting to see similar kinds of slowly, and then all at once kind of changes. So it just takes some time, but I'm confident that most of the banks understand the challenges and the opportunities, but it just takes some time internally to get people aligned.
Thank you so much. We have a few questions for you and Dick. with regards to the status of the relationship of fintechs and banks, but I'll hold on to that in a little bit. Malik, could you share a little bit about that like I said, I really felt like a 2-year-old in awe when I was listening to the ABC of fintech. But could you also share a lot about the advocacy work that you're doing for Gift? I understand that last Monday you guys launched the regional advisory for Gift. Malik?
Thank you, Amor, and thank you for this opportunity again. And Amor is, one of those very humble folks. She will not say that she is also part of our ASEAN Exco. So I do want to give a shout out to Amor as well. She's been an active partner and participant in this journey as well. So Amor, it all goes back to the E in my presentation, the ecosystem. And it's not just being clever by half, having lived and worked in Singapore for many years before this as well, and having been an active part of the digital and fintech ecosystem and being a mentor there at many accelerators since the almost the beginning of the journey. It was quite apparent to me, whether you look at Singapore or Hong Kong or in parallel, how the larger markets like China and India and Indonesia, which are probably more similar to the Philippines than smaller city states like Hong Kong and Singapore or Dubai. And I have spoken at 125 plus conferences in more than 20 countries. So I've had the firsthand pleasure of interacting with ecosystem leaders from all over the world. It was quite apparent to me and to us that the success or otherwise of fintech in a market, in a nation, as I said, ABCD technology is now more and more available. You have Huawei here, you have Huawei elsewhere, you have Alibaba having taken a stake here and investing in Gcash and Tencent. So the biggies are there everywhere. The technology is available. What differentiates and distinguishes and enables is the ecosystem. And in a true spirit of give more, take less. I know it sounds a little lofty, but that's really how Gift came about. The genesis is really after one of the panels at Connect Tech Asia in 2018. The 5 of us, I was the panel moderator and the 5 other panelists, we were just sitting for an after party at Marina Bay Sands overlooking the wonderful water in Singapore. And we said, hey, the problem is we talk good things at panels like this. And then we go back to our busy lives on Monday morning and the conversations, the great discussions and some opportunities that we've discussed here get lost. So how can we continue the dialogue? How can we create a think tank? And how can we create a global knowledge pool, learning pool, so that we help each other again with the true spirit of giving more than receiving. And that's how Gift was born. As John said, it is, if not the largest, certainly one of the largest and most inclusive. So we take pride more in the fact that we are diverse and inclusive and less in terms of size, because it's a by invite only forum. So we have about 1,000 members, not 10,000 or 100,000. But the idea is each one of them who's there is there to contribute to the ecosystem. We are represented by very senior bankers, by fintech industry leaders, by regulators, by folks from World Bank, IMF, United Nations, etc., ADB, from more than 40 countries, from as far out as LATAM, Argentina and Chile in the west to Taiwan and Japan in the east. And with your support and with the support of other ecosystem leaders from ASEAN, we had the pleasure of launching our Gift ASEAN chapter earlier this week at your World FinTech Forum. And stay tuned. We will engage more of you ecosystem leaders in the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malik. Now, yeah, these types of forums definitely have a way of initially connecting people, and then afterwards we do all the hard work. Now, speaking of all the hard work that's being done, I'd like to bring the attention to Mr. John O. So, John, we're launching and signing something historic today in this forum. Could you share that with the rest of the world?
Sure. Well, the UK FCDO has a technical assistance program that they have been providing, and I've been honored to be a fintech advisor or fintech lead for them in this effort. So in fact, I've been looking at the whole ASEAN market from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Myanmar, and the Philippines. In the Philippines, when we came to look at developing a program, we actually had a request. The Philippines was quite interested in doing an industry sandbox. The Philippines has long been a leader. You had the first regulatory sandbox in the world, and then it was called the test and learn approach. And then the UK changed that with a couple of rules and called it a regulatory sandbox. But in principle, the Central Bank of the Philippines was doing the same thing. So the industry, like we saw in the UK, there was lots of discussion about having an industry sandbox that would kind of be an incubator for going into the regulatory sandbox and would cover institutions that were outside of the regulatory purview of the central bank. Well, as that developed over the year, the central bank we were also helping, the central bank was looking at open banking. During that analysis, they realized, hey, we want to go beyond open banking to open finance. So as I said, that is being launched in tandem. The industry sandbox was developed at the same time, and we're really pleased to see that Apex in Singapore has agreed to host that platform. So we will have a central sandbox for open APIs that will be free for small providers. There is a fee for the larger companies, but for all the startups and everything else, it's free. It's great that there's going to be this great sandbox where people can come together, and the central bank now with the open finance rules is going to make it much more flexible to be able to test lots of different open API solutions. So I'm very hopeful. As I said, that data is the gold mine at the end. That's the new gold, the new oil, so to speak, is being able to mine data. So the only way to do that is really to connect payment providers together, but more importantly, open up the banks. And we're really pleased that we've got players like Union Bank and RCBC, both associations, really excited about this. So I'm looking forward to that. As I said, I think this will be hopefully a bit of a tipping point to kind of drive some innovation, hopefully some new products and services that will support not only financial inclusion, but a lot of the players that Coins and DragonPay and the others in the payment industry, and hopefully get the banks to move into being much more competitive, like we see in maybe the Philippines will become the new Singapore. We're always dreaming, but at least the framework is there. In fact, it's better, I think, than the frameworks we've seen in the other markets. It is open for comment now. It's publicly, the BSP shared it. Happy to share that link. So it's open for public comment now. And the hope is that that'll be issued by January of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. Now, I know we're pressed for time, but I'd like a very quick 30-minute, 40-second closing from each of the panelists. It seems like like I said in my opening, the tech focus has shifted from the West to Asia, as evidenced by the fact that many of you here are focusing on Southeast Asia and the Philippines. Any thoughts? Dick, let's start with you.
Okay, well, 2020 has been a doom and gloom kind of year, and despite that fact, I think fintech was going in a totally different trend. I think everyone in this group would agree that it has been a good year actually for fintech. So 2021, I think, could only get better from here.
Yes, and move to Asia. I don't want to call it Schadenfreude, but yep, it's there are those that have benefited in fintech, definitely. Hassan?
Sure. The two things I want to point out for 2021 is I think one of the big unlocks that we're about to see with the Philippines is the ascendance of e-commerce. I think that's something that has been we've been waiting in our market for that to kind of really take off, and that's sort of coming up in a way that is sort of localized and unique for our needs. And I think that's something that's also we're seeing a lot in Asia of not trying to just copy from the West, but really trying to make solutions homegrown or adapted to kind of solving real user problems. And I think that's a really kind of wonderful theme that we're kind of seeing play out all across. And the second kind of overarching theme that I'm personally very excited and bullish about is, how Philippines and other kind of jurisdictions lean into virtual currency and crypto. Because I do think that there is an opportunity to leapfrog, especially with a lot of the regulatory unclarity that we're seeing in the West. And I think the fact that the Philippines especially continues to be the vanguard for virtual currency and the model for the rest of ASEAN. And it's going to be something that we're going to see very exciting new use cases emerge in the next coming year.
Thank you. The rest of the country is still interestingly very crypto averse. There's a lot of education we need in that market. Thank you so much, Hassan, and we look forward to having you again. Malik?
I think my esteemed colleagues on the panel have already said some interesting things. So I'll just share a very quick personal snippet and note and something for us to reflect on. So yes, this has been an absolutely unprecedented year. Perhaps nothing like this has happened in our lifetime or will happen in our lifetime. And it's been a blessing in crisis for the digital ecosystem. We've seen a huge jump in digital transactions, whether e-commerce or digital payments, as Hassan said. And I personally actually feel quite envious. I've spent 20 years in the digital payments and digital banking space, and all my career at Citi and otherwise, I was trying to push digital payments, digital transactions, digital banking, and it was always so difficult. And lo and behold, in just a few months in 2020, it shattered all records. So sometimes it's a matter of the timing being just right. This is exactly the right time for the Philippines. And that's why I started my slide by saying we have to move from evolution to revolution. We have to capitalize on this opportunity. But I also want to end on a note saying that with all this euphoria, we should not lose sight of the fact that this pandemic has really hurt. And it's hurt the most marginalized, the most vulnerable, the MSMEs, the ones who are excluded have become even more excluded. So fintech has to find our ecosystem, our industry has to find a sustainable and meaningful way of benefiting the most marginalized as well. Otherwise, honestly, it will be more of the same and all talk. Thank you.
John?
And Malik just took my last point. I was going to say, don't forget the digital divide. We still have a lot of people who are outside, and there are going to be challenges to reaching them. Digital will not, hopefully through agents and other means. I am excited. I do believe that e-commerce is kind of a great equalizer, provides inclusive economic growth that fintech services in and of themselves don't. The e-commerce actually can provide lots of opportunities for people, even those in rural areas. So I think it'll be creative. We'll have to look at, agents and other means of doing it so that people who may not have access to a phone or a smartphone are still able to transact, still able to participate in this great fintech future. I'm very bullish on the Philippines. I do think, you've got one of the best central banks that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. They're very open, really diligent, and great policy environment. And Filipinos have that, round the clock work ethic. So I do agree with everybody else. I think now is the time. E-commerce is coming. Let's make sure we have financial inclusion in there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The coming together of a perfect storm, or as you guys have referred to, is this fintech revolution. We are all very happy to be seeing it in our lifetime. And here's to really breaking down that digital divide. Thank you so much.